Good afternoon. I know it's afternoon. And I don't know about y'all, I haven't had lunch yet, so I am not experiencing the food letdown of post-lunchtime. But I will probably pass out due to not having lunch. My name's Olivia Omega. I am the Founder Track Chair of Denver Startup Week. This is my 5th year being Founder Track Chair and probably my 8th year volunteering. So I just want to welcome you all to this session. How many of you saw the session and were elated, overjoyed, and moved by this topic? Yeah? That's why you're here. I'm so excited that we have this a part of Denver Startup Week and that all of you are here to hear this very important conversation. So I am going to hand it over to Derek Watson. And I had to introduce myself, but I went to CU Boulder some 20 years ago. Let's go Buffs. And so I had to reintroduce myself to Derek, who was there at the same time. But everyone give a warm round of applause, and then tell me your name. Marcus Johnson, and I'll let them take it away. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here today. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes. Perfect. Well, as Olivia said, my name is Derek Watson, and I have the honor of being the director of the Denver Construction Careers Program within the Office of Economic Development here for the city and county. I've been with the city about 4.5 years, and during that time, I've had the pleasure of working to develop a very important initiative that I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. But I want to take this time to introduce my friend and colleague, Marcus Johnson, who is going to join us in this conversation today.
Hi, everybody. Marcus Johnson. I was privileged and honored to have formerly been with the DCCP program with Dito in the city. I'm looking around the room. I see a lot of familiar faces that help support me in my role there at the city, and I'm happy to engage in this most important topic and conversation.
Great. Thank you. Before we get into our session today, I want to spend a little bit of time sharing with you my background and how I got here today. As I said, I work for the city and county, but prior to working for the city and county, I worked at the University of Colorado in Boulder for over 30 years. And I retired from CU Boulder in 2015. And so I did all the things retired people do, right? You go and travel, and I played golf, and I did all this stuff. But I thought, there's more I can do. And so what I do next, I want to really be able to contribute to impacting my community. And I ran across Marcus, and Marcus said, hey, come help me with this initiative. And the initiative is really designed to increase Denver residents and their opportunities on city-funded construction projects. And so that's what I do officially. But unofficially, I'm committed to engaging our community to talk about issues that are important to me. And I said to myself, when I go back to work, I want to do something that I will have a platform to talk about things that are important to me. And the economic and wealth gap in Denver in the United States for black people is staggering. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And so today, I want to spend some time talking about that issue. But before we can talk about the wealth gap, we have to define what wealth is, right? And when I started looking at this, man, I looked at about 5 million definitions of wealth. And so I landed on this one from the Federal Reserve, because if anybody knows about money, it would be the Federal Reserve System, right? And so, but I discovered the word wealth is much like happiness. Happiness to this person may be different from that person or this gentleman. And so wealth today, what we're talking about is money. So I want to be clear about that. I'm not talking about your wealth of relationships with your friends and neighbors. I'm talking about economic resources and money. So this definition says Wealth measures the value of all assets of worth owned by a person, a community, company, or country. Wealth is determined by taking the total market value of all the physical and intangible assets owned and then subtracting the debts. I mean, it sounds simple, right? You look at all the stuff that you own, and then you take away all the stuff that you have debt or you owe. And the difference between the two gives you wealth. Very simple definition. But the complexities and the contributions and factors that has for black people in this country has been, and I'll leave you to fill in the blank on that, because it hasn't been what I would characterize as equitable in any way, shape, or form. So as we move on in this conversation, I just want you to understand that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about wealth of intrinsic value. We're talking about economics. Now I'm going to ask Marcus to really help us with understanding some of the contributing factors to wealth. And one of those contributing factors is income. And so, Marcus, do you want to take a few minutes to talk about income?
Okay, all right. So, I'm glad you kind of teed this up, Derek, because, Derek was my mentor in college. So I went to CU, and, I was looking out on the horizon like, okay, what am I going to do when I graduate with this mountain of debt? What am I going to do when, I get my first job? And I got lucky. I landed a fairly great job with Motorola. I had a couple offers here in Denver. I sat with Derek, and, one of the things Derek told me right off the bat was, no new car, no new clothes, buy a house. So that was the first thing I did. I was on a mission to buy a house. So I still remember taking all my little bonus money from everything and cobbling together all my pennies to buy my first house for $157,000 in Phoenix, Arizona. And, that really struck a chord to me that I looked out and I saw several of my peers. It never occurred to them to do that. And that really set my life on a different trajectory. So what I didn't tell you about that was that, life happens with careers. I wasn't in corporate America long before I had my first layoff. But because I had built some equity in my house, I knew a little bit about real estate. I said, hey, let me give this real estate thing a try. So got my license, passed the test the first time, no big deal. And then I set out selling properties in Scottsdale and in Arizona. And I was very successful at it. Fast forward a few years, I came back to Denver, and we were looking at this big gap. And I started looking for ways I could help people really try to close this wealth gap, really kind of shrink that barrier to entry into owning a house in Denver. And then I ran across a few programs that we'll get into a little bit later, but, it's very important that we can see in these times that I think America is coming to a reckoning to where they're realizing you can't have, 5, 10, 15% of your population economically disadvantaged to the point where they're in negative poverty, right? It's just not a sustainable model. And then on top of that, all of these systems that have happened to black people over the years, it wasn't because, those people just don't know how to do this or whatever. There were systematic programs put in place. These were intentional policies made by our government that were written into our bureaucratic policies and procedures to produce these outcomes to where you see this big disparity in not only home ownership but black wealth. What I am pleased and hopeful is that there are communities like Denver popping up all over the country that really want to do something about that. And I was pleased enough to really encounter a program called the Deerfield Funds from Gary Community Investments. You know,
Into
yeah.
that, Marcus, we're gonna
Yeah.
save that because
Okay,
I
all
know
right.
that's one of the things that you really want to talk about, and I think it's important for people to know. But this slide right here is a staggering statistic. If you look at this in America, and this is coming from Gary Community Investments right here in our backyard, they're saying the median income for African Americans is $18,000 compared to $170,000 for our white counterparts. That to me is unimaginable, but that's the reality of the world we live in today when it comes to dealing with this issue of our wealth gap. Now, okay, I'll let you go back to your piece.
Yeah. So, you know, when you start looking at this, numbers don't lie, right? So I've heard all of these anecdotal research that, you know, black wealth is, you know, 10% of white wealth in America. And, you know, they run reports on this in the census, right? So this is our own government telling us what these numbers are. So, you know, what we did was take a look at, you know, what home ownership looks like in Colorado. So these are well-published numbers. And you can see from the census, the 2021 population count is very clear. You know, black, non-Hispanic residents, you know, make up about 238,000 people in Colorado, okay? Then you look at, if you advance the slide there, then you look at the home ownership rate, right? There's a gap here where 28% is in a deficit. So all things considered equal in Colorado, you know, you look at especially in the Denver metro area, you know, skills, education attainment, you know, all of the quality items that come up with living here in Colorado. It's a fairly progressive community as well. But you still see this huge gap, almost 30% in home ownership for owner-occupied properties. That's staggering, and that leads into that net wealth calculation that Derek mentioned earlier. So I'm going to hop into some of the programs that are out there to help combat that, right? So one of the, and what I didn't also tell folks is that I have my real estate license here with Town & Country Realty. And, you know, it's an honor and privilege to work with friends and family and people I know to really help them find homes, help them with their real estate advice, you know, really try to, you know, really get them situated. And, you know, we had, Derek and I were having a conversation, and we were looking at some programs for work and when I was at Dito. And then I happened to stumble across a couple of first-time home buyer programs. Now, how many of you have heard about down payment assistance programs? Okay. So if you haven't heard about that, there are a number of different programs. Some of them are income-based. Some of them have different criteria. But everything is unique to the individual, right? And these programs are really set there to help people understand that if you're working and you're working full-time in Denver and you're making, you know, 80, 90% of the area median income, it's almost impossible to save up for a down payment, especially at these escalating prices. So these programs were put in place to help everybody in Denver, right? And then we started noticing trends where, again, that's still participation in some of those down payment assistance programs and guidance to home ownership. It wasn't being ratably taken advantage of between ethnicities and races. And so, you know, I started doing a little bit of research on some that are really focused for different populations. Are there programs out there for single mothers? Are there programs out there for the BIPOC community? Are there programs out there for maybe new Americans who don't have, 5, 6 years of credit history? And I was pleased to find out there are programs out there, and one that I've used quite a bit with some clients to help them get into home ownership, which was really pretty remarkable. I mean, when I found out about this, I was like, wait a minute, this sounds like too good to be true. But basically, what they do is they can couple and combine down payment assistance programs like the CHAFA funds, which helps you with closing costs and some of these other material costs. That can be a huge percentage of buying a home, as well as couple that with a down payment assistance program, so you have two pools of money that help you get into a home. So I remember when I bought my first home in Phoenix, I got this $10,000 signing bonus. I thought I had enough. I thought I'm good, right? No. They have these things called closing costs that are associated with that, right? So that $10,000 didn't even close the closing costs on my house when I bought it, because I was a high-risk borrower, just recent grad, hadn't been on my job for 2 years. Interest rates, I think, were like hovering around 8%, right? And so your closing costs, prepaids, reserves, all of that was eaten up with that money. I had to, luckily I had some other stash money to kind of come up with a down payment. But what I'm saying is, when people start looking at what the total cost it is to get into a home, it can be very intimidating, especially if you're check to check, or you don't, your total life savings, you may have, $1,000, $3,000, $4,000 liquid cash. So these programs are really there to help people who have excellent character, they have decent credit, and they deserve a shot at home ownership.
Mark, it's because you're looking at $40,000 for support in purchasing a home. And I can tell you, one of the first steps in building generational wealth is what? To have a house that you can leave to your children and your children's children. And so this part of what you're talking about, Marcus, is really and truly one of the first steps that folks need to take, is trying to get into home ownership. And this, you want to talk about the Deerfield Fund, is really...
Let me walk through a quick example, Derek, and I'm sorry if I get a little excited. I feel like I had some coffee before I came in. I feel like a little Labrador puppy, especially when I, think I can help people, right? So this PATH program, I ran across this at a realtor education seminar, and I was like, man, I really got to get the word out and share this with folks. And what this is designed to do in the Denver metro area, if you identify as BIPOC or Black, there have been grants that have been out there to really help you get a toehold into home ownership. So if you're looking at a purchase price of about $600,000 in the Denver metro area, it sounds crazy, but I mean, that's about a little under the average price of homes right now. That might be a daunting figure to look at purchasing. So what this program does is it gives up to a $20,000 grant for a first-time home buyer. So that grant can be used for your closing costs. Like I said, these are those unexpected fees when it comes to, hey, I thought insurance was going to be X, but then it's Y. Closing costs from the title company, and then there's, I call them junk fees, but there's all fees that you see on your settlement statement that have nothing to do with you gaining equity in the home. They're just fees, and they're administrative fees, and they pay for insurances and warranties, but they're necessary. We all have to pay them, okay? Then you have another, then you can couple that with the program where they will actually pay up to $40,000 as a down payment. So you can see you can easily exceed into that 3.5% for FHA qualifying, or even 10% down if you couple it with that grant. And the way that Deerfield program works, it's a silent second. So, this is not money that you have to make a payment on. So you got $40,000 into your home, that's a down payment. So let's say on a $500,000 house, now instead of having a $500,000 mortgage, you have a $460,000 mortgage, right? Now the way that works for Deerfield to recoup their funds, it's a loan. It's just a silent second. So you're not making payments on that the entire time you own your home. Meanwhile, when you're building equity, and you know how equity is happening here, now you're on the other side of the equation. Now you want those homes to shoot up in value, right? So you're building equity. When you go to sell this home, you just pay them back 5% of their 5% gain on that, right? So what does that do for you, And I can talk to you about the particulars of the program, but basically lowers your monthly payments, eliminates some of the financial burden into getting into a home, and it makes sure that it's affordable for you. And these predatory loans that we saw in 2006, 2007 that caused the economic crash, you still got to qualify. You got to do a little work, but there is help to make sure you can get it happen. And I'm here to tell you firsthand, I've seen these programs work for multiple people who thought home ownership was completely out of reach, okay? You want to go over the benefits?
Yeah, as he said, one of the benefits is you get to build equity in your house. But the other thing, I don't know, it's been a long time since I've rented in Denver, but I had a friend of mine who was renting an apartment, and she called me one day in tears. You know why? Because they went up $300 on her rent. And what do? There's not much you can do other than try to go find another place that's just as expensive as the other place that you just left. And so it adds that stability for your life financially. And I'm not going to go over all of these. I know we only have an hour, so I will try to get through as much of this. Mm-hmm.
If you go back,
doesn't want to go back, Marcus.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I know we're talking about financial wealth, but owning a property, this health and wellness, I did some, because you guys who know me know, this is just me. I double clicked on that. I was like, really, what does this really mean? It has been statistically proven that people who own their homes live longer and healthier lives. We're talking about an environmental factor here. You have better control. You have better access to health care. When you go to a doctor, I used to see this on applications. Do you own or rent? And when you start looking at even the downstream impacts, they're doing studies right now on what it means to own a home for your children and your grandchildren. So this is a critical important. I know we're talking about money, but that one is one that stood out to me as a very, very valuable form of wealth.
What we can do, and we kind of talked about that. One of the first things we can do is encourage and support home ownership. And the program that Marcus talks about really does do that, and it works. I've seen it. I've seen it in action. You'll be surprised when a single mom walks into a realtor's office and they give her a document that says, welcome, you're a homeowner now. That changes her life. That changes the life of her children as well. So something to keep in mind. The other factor that contributes to the wealth gap is education. And I've worked in education for some 30 years, and I understand the value of a college degree. And it's important, but one of the things I think is important for us to understand today is college isn't for everybody. I tell you, man, I have more degrees than I can sneeze at. But I got more student debt than I can sneeze at, too. I'll be paying them student loans for the rest of my life, and probably when I'm dead, you know. So education is an important factor, though. How much education you have allows you to get opportunities that aren't real accessible to others. I mean, when I applied for my job, you know, one of the first things they asked me is, what kind of education do you have? You can't even get an interview with some of these jobs without a degree. But that's not the only factor. Now, I'm like Marcus. I'm a researcher, and so I thought about, okay, well, what kind of occupations are people working under? What kind of occupations do black people work in this country? And I looked at the Economic Policy Institute survey, and these are some of the areas that I found staggering. Education, training, libraries. Now, I don't know how many brothers I've seen in the library, but I'm assuming it's probably education and training. And that's at 10%. I mean, that's a fairly large number. You look at community and social service occupations, that's 20% of the African American population is working in that area. Now, if you combine those two, that's a third of the African American population working in two areas. The one thing I know about both of those areas, they don't pay a lot of money. Now, you look at the occupations that pay, like the sciences, we're at 6%. Look at, and I was surprised, and I was happy about this stat, computer and mathematics, because we always hear, well, you know, black people don't like math. We don't do math. That ain't true. This number tells me that we represent 10% of the population that's working in computers. Pretty impressive. Architectural and engineering. I can tell you, engineers, I have a lot of respect for them. I really do. But it's so hard. The curriculum in engineering is so hard. I don't know how anybody graduates with an engineering degree. But they pay quite a bit. And you can see African Americans are less than 6% in that occupation. So it's not just getting a degree. It's the type of degree that you earn that's important. Now, I'm gonna take a plug here and say college, like I said, isn't for everybody. There are vocational occupations that pay quite well, that we've kind of lost our way with. I'll give you an example. I had an electrician come to my house about a month ago. He was there for 45 minutes, and he charged me $350. I said, well, you're going to have to stay about 15 more minutes so I can do the math on this. And so there are occupations and careers that really provide great income that aren't necessarily college degrees. And so in Denver, we're investing literally billions of dollars into our infrastructure. Everywhere you turn, what do you see? Construction. You know? And so I would encourage folks to consider, or encourage the people in your audience or in your atmosphere to look at a career in construction. Because, number one, it's going to be around. They're not going to stop building. And number two, they pay you to learn. You know, like I said before, I got all these degrees, but I got all the debt that goes with them. In construction, they pay you to learn. And so I want to encourage you to think about that as an alternative as you think about generating income or addressing this wealth gap. Now, this next slide, I don't know if you can see this very well, but it talks about unemployment. And this first slide over here on the left really was interesting to me because it shows that African Americans are amongst the highest ethnic groups that are either unemployed or not in the labor workforce. The other chart over here on the right is interesting as well, because if you look at male and female, we're still very high compared to everybody else. You know, one of the rules of thumbs that I've always heard about black unemployment is if you look at white unemployment, double that for black people. How many of you have ever heard that? That's true. So our unemployment rates are twice as high as those for our white counterparts. So not only are we not making a lot of money, we're often underemployed or unemployed. Now, there was a chart that I didn't put on here that was even more staggering. African Americans, and I'm going to say this slowly, African Americans are the only race in America that females generate more income than males. Think about that. Females in our community make more money than our males do. Now, there are probably lots of contributing factors to that as well that I'm not going to go into, but that's a staggering statistic. And when I think about it, because you always hear about the plight of black men. You know, we're an endangered species. There's so much going against us, but there's just as much going against my sisters. And I never want to lose sight of that. And so, I don't know if you remember, Oprah Winfrey once said that if you want to change the plight of a nation, change the plight of the women in that nation. And I say that about the African American community. If we want to really address this gap, we really have to not just focus on males, but focus on the females in our community as well, because they have volumes to contribute. So I want to leave you with that. See what else we got. What can we do? You know, we can definitely encourage. Oh, am I looking at the right slide? Yeah. We can definitely encourage people to pursue higher education and vocational occupations. We can look at and support our students in our communities for the fields of study that they want to go into. And once again, I would encourage you to think broadly about that, not just thinking about, oh, I got to go to college and get a degree. There are other options. College is expensive. Like I said, I've got mounds of debt. Find ways to support those students financially. One of the things that I learned in the world that I work in, apprentices, getting some of that hands-on learning. They call them interns. They call them lots of different things. And a lot of those interns work for free, but not anymore. The program that I work in, our apprentices, we pay them a salary. Now, we may not pay them $40 an hour, but we pay them enough to make it worth their time to participate in the training. So make sure that as you are having this conversation, encourage people to explore internships and apprenticeships and learn about an occupation, because there's nothing worse. I don't know if you ever heard anybody say, well, I hate my job. You ever heard anybody say that? Yeah. Well, it's because they didn't really get a good understanding of it before they went into it. So, food for thought. I know we're running out of time here. Final thoughts. Number one, we want to increase the income of people in our community. And one of the ways to do that is obviously education and training. But it's not just to get that education and training. You have to invest. And the first and most important investment we often make in our whole lives are with our homes. Getting into home ownership. As Marcus said, there are programs out there, there is support out there to help people move forward in that direction. But that's definitely one of the important factors we want to take away. We want to improve the recruitment and retention and graduation of individuals pursuing training either in post-secondary education or vocational training. You know, I often, when I worked at CU, I was like, it doesn't do you any good to say I went to CU. what does you good is to say, I graduated from CU. You know, I used to talk to our recruiters all the time, and they were like, well, what kind of things can we do? What kind of programs can we develop to attract more African-American people to our campus? You know what I told them? I said, invite them to graduation. Because that's ultimately the important goal of going to college, is to graduate. So that's, you know, and we created a whole program for black students' graduation. Because black students honestly weren't included in the graduation from the bigger campus where you're sitting in the stadium with 5,000 other people. We wanted to acknowledge and recognize those black students, and we're still doing that today on the campus. As I said, employment. We didn't even get a chance to talk about business. You know, we only have an hour, and I'm not Gandalf or Dumbledore where I can wave this magic wand over you and really give you all of what happens, all the contributing factors for the wealth gap in America. But I've tried to give you a few items that you can take away today and really begin to share this with others. And I know we've got about 20 minutes left, and what I want to do is I want to open it up, because it really should be a conversation. You know, I'm not some big diversity officer. I'm not some economist or venture capitalist that can give you projections about the economy and all of that good stuff. I'm just a man that's using the platform that I have to share information about issues that are important to me. I don't profess to have all the answers. I want to hear from you. I want to get ideas and thoughts from the folks in this room today on what we can do in Denver to try to reduce that wealth gap. So I'm going to open it up to the audience. And are there any questions, comments that you guys? Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
And Derek, Marcus and Derek,
Oh,
for
sure.
doing this presentation, for sharing this information. I think it's going to be very helpful. I'm thinking, you know, to do it more in the community and to put it out there more. Also, some of the things, in addition to what the presentation is showing, a lot of things that I've worked with people that have challenges like building or repairing credit, past tax issues, that we can work that into some of the, like the funding that's available. You have to qualify for it, is one of the things that we said. But if we're working with somebody and they have credit challenges and they don't know how to even start with that, that's an area I would like to see more.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you one of the requirements of this program is called financial literacy. And you have to take classes in order to qualify for this program. And they walk through credit and how to improve your credit. And so you're absolutely right. That's a very critical factor. And you know, when I was talking to a friend of mine about doing this presentation, and she said, it's great if you do it for Denver Startup Week, but you need to bring that to my church. You need to bring it to our rec centers. We need to have these conversations all over. And believe me, if I had time, I would dedicate myself just to doing this. But intern. I know. That's a great question, but good point. Thank you so much. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you about a program that we currently are about to launch. It's through what we call our Special Revenue Fund. And it's really designed to work with students in DPS to get them the exposure to, and I'm selfish in this because I work in capital development. So is to get them exposure to careers in construction. And so whenever Turner Construction or one of our major construction projects, when they go in to get the permits for those projects, they can contribute to a fee that goes towards supporting exactly what you just talked about. And so we're developing that now. And I can tell you we've been collecting funds for about 9 months. And it's not a small number. I mean, you know how many permits and fees the city issues every year? A lot. And so we're developing that mechanism to fund some of these initiatives in our public schools. And you're exactly right. It has to start when they're in middle school, elementary school. It's got to start early. We got to make these careers a part of their DNA when they're young, because getting to those elite schools require academic preparation from a child. You know, I love this restaurant I go to. It's well, I won't tell you what kind, but it's a good restaurant. But guess what it's right next door to? It's right next door to a program called Kumon. Have you guys ever heard of Kumon? And I see kids in there walking in and out of there. It can't be more than 7 years old. So we have to prepare our children for academic success early on. And programs like that allow you to do that. Other questions? Yes, sir.
To build off of what you just said, there's a couple of nonprofits, if you don't want to go through the city. Our Association of Black Professional Engineers and Scientists is an awesome program. Caves, I highly recommend it because
Yeah.
they do all kinds of engineering and STEM, and they start in middle school and go through high school, and they do computer science, and they do every aspect of architecture. There's another one called Economic Literacy Colorado, which helps individuals and groups get access, especially middle school and teens, on how to actually learn financial literacy so that they don't have to wait till they're out of college to understand the value of a house or how to invest or how to plan for the future. My question for you, my question for you is, historically, it's been really hard for African Americans to get loans from banks. And I want to know, has the environment in Denver changed in terms of being able to access the capital to be able to have home ownership grow? Because that's been a huge barrier in the past.
Yeah, I can take that one. So the short answer is, sadly, some of the upfront barriers have been kind of baked into the cake. So they look at things like capital reserves, credit history. If your net wealth is $18,000 in Denver, you're going to probably have some blemishes on your credit. Because life happens, right? On my way over here, my bank called me and said, "Oh, you didn't send your car note payment in, right?" But I had such a long relationship with them. They called me, and I was like, "Oh, I sent it to the wrong account." They were like, "Oh, we see that, Mr. Johnson, blah, blah, blah." But I have kind of an in-your-face relationship with where I park my money. And because you're not going to just sit on my money without giving me services. But you have to be taught that level of advocacy for yourself so that when it comes to for a new mortgage or a loan or saying, "Hey, I got 28% for this investment property, not 30, no problem." So, if I were going to say, I know that's a long walk, but there's still some systematic barriers around there. Now, what I can say is that there are a lot of members in the community that recognize that, and they want to reach out and teach you the tricks and trades of, like, hey, if your ratios are off, here's a trick. Here's a freebie. If you got someone that may have marginal credit in your family that you trust and you have good credit, you could just add their name to one of your credit cards you don't use. Their credit score will skyrocket, right? I didn't know that trick, but a banker said, "Hey, man, help me with it," because I had to do this for a family member. So I just put his name on it, boom, VA qualified in his home. 15 days, it just changed over, right? So there are those people in the community that can work with you and teach you those back-end underwriter tricks. What do they look for? You'll never find that as advice on a website. You'll never find it. So again, I would say just really engage with your banks. Understand that they need you more than you need them. That's your money.
I know we're running out of time, and I think we have time for one more question. The gentleman in the back. Well, we'll get to your question too. We'll start with him, and then we'll get to you, ma'am.
I'm not sure if you guys discussed it, but kind of piggybacks off this question in terms of criteria for qualifying for home buying loans. Like, the speaker had mentioned he's carrying a lot of student loan debt. Are there any programs at the city level that assist or would provide, you would qualify for a loan if you're carrying a high debt to income ratio?
Yeah, so what I would have, everybody's situation is unique. So you need to look at very unique things. What I found in my practice and years of doing it is that usually the things that you think are impacting you the most are not. And there's probably just some things on the fringe that you could either consolidate or move around a little bit. So I don't know of any city programs that are gonna like pay for your student loans or anything. But you know, we could probably talk one-on-one and just see, you know, if you have a unique scenario, maybe I can find the answer for you.
Your student loans, if you do work for a nonprofit, there are programs that are designed to support you in paying back your student loans if you're working for a nonprofit agency. In the city, last time I checked, was nonprofit. And so that just by working at the city, you can qualify for a program that will help and support your student loan payback. Oh. It ain't go.
Trying to figure out how to manage it, like, and trying to get a, yeah, I got you. Let's, probably your unique situation is better to handle one-on-one, right? Or that scenario. And then, because everybody's different. Your credit is like your fingerprint. You know, it's very unique.
Okay, so hi, my name is Michelle Jackson, and I actually am in the personal finance space. So thank you for having this conversation. And I actually have, it pains me to say this. Ironically, today I released an episode that was about how not everyone should be buying a home. And the reason why, and I own a home. I own a home in Wash Park. I grew up here. So I say this for the following reasons. It is a wonderful way to build wealth. However, there are a lot of downsides to home ownership, like the following. Last week, I woke up after, I went to bed, I woke up, I was like, what's that sound? It was a waterfall in my bathroom. And because you're a homeowner, you have to pay for that. And like when home ownership goes like wrong, because it does like every 3 to 4 years.
If something happens.
That's cash out of your pocket. So this idea that, and I should say, I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity. So like I'm doing good. But I really need for people to understand that home ownership can be a blessing and a curse depending on how well you are, like how prepared you are for the downsides of it. And there's more than one way to build wealth, like investing over time, which I wish we could talk about more, like earning more money over time.
I think you bring forward a number of really valid points, very valid, and Marcus, I'll let you talk about the real estate piece of it, but you said something that we haven't said one word about, which is investing. That's one of the biggest strategies we can incorporate is to invest. But we don't have the conversation about investing because I got to pay for that furnace that just broke. I got to pay for, a flat tire. We don't have the income to be able to offset some of those.
I'm going to say that we do have the income, but we don't have the conversation. So we
I don't know how many people make $175,000 a year.
you can invest at $5 a month. Like you can start that small.
And I talked about that. You're right.
I'm not saying that you don't. I'm just saying that a lot of people have at least a small amount of discretionary income that they can start to build that habit. It may not feel like it's significant, but it may feel significant to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that if we say, hey, like maybe you have $5, $10, a week or a month, to get in the habit of doing this, and then as they're proactively changing their jobs and things like that, they can increase that over time. If you're working for the city of Denver and they pay into your retirement, like you know what I mean, like and if you're paying into retirement upon signing for that job, and then they match that, that's investing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just feel like yes, we can do that, but maybe we start smaller than we feel is even though
Right.
we start small.
But you're right. We have to have the conversation. It has to be a part of our DNA. And it hasn't been.
Let me push back on that. And what's your name again? Michelle? No, and let me push back on a couple of scenarios here. And this is just the way I structured my life. But you mentioned the unforeseen circumstance where a pipe burst. If you're in an apartment in downtown Denver, right off of Spear, and the pipes burst and all your stuff is ruined, are you in the exact same situation with your?
Have insurance though, right? So I have to call my insurance company to get my money.
You got insurance on your house? They have renter's insurance.
A renter should have renter's insurance if they know to have that.
Right. But you know what renter's insurance doesn't cover? Is you moving out. Because that's what they're suing the developers for.
Yeah, but you're doing it the grant.
And exactly.
It still doesn't convince me that you're
No. Another scenario. I think there is a big, when you look at the amount of ownership and how wealth is built in this country, primarily for working class people, it has been through purchasing, acquiring, and then transferring real estate wealth on to their heirs, whether that be through equity shares, through inheritance, or even pulling some of that equity down to help with, life happening. So, and then a fundamental tenet of my survival, like I know the reason I work so hard is because I want a roof overhead. I want a nice roof, right? So to me, I look at that like when I start looking at all the financial benefits, even from a financial planner, or an advisor, you would look at it and say, wait a minute, if you're earning a certain amount of money, you need some tax deductions to shelter your money. Having a home, okay.
I own a home.
Right.
So, like,
No.
I'm from a family of homeowners.
Okay.
But there's a whole bunch of people who are from families of homeowners in Denver who no longer own their homes because they
Yeah.
didn't have a succession plan in order to transfer those homes to other Black family members. So I
yeah.
think that the conversation around like my mom owns a home free and clear. In order for me to inherit it, even though I'm an only child, like she needs a will. Like
Right.
I can't just hope like vibes that that's going to happen.
Right.
So I think the deeper conversation is if we're going to buy a home because it's the right time in our lives to do that.
Right.
It's like a bigger process than just we're buying a home. It's
Yeah.
like we're buying a home and here's my will and here's this is my daughter and she's going to inherit and this is laid out.
So part of those financial literacy programs that are granting these funds, because they're putting their money on the line too, as a grant or a loan, they provide some of those education tools and resources so that people can tap into what you're talking about is upping your game on financial literacy, ownership, making sure you understand once you're a homeowner, you need to do all of these things to protect yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, look, I know we've gone over our time today. Let me just say thank you all for being here today. I hope it was informative and enlightening to each of you. And I encourage you to continue this conversation in the spaces that you occupy. Thank you so much.